Thanks for being here. Thanks for the kind introduction. I'm actually really talking about a European or maybe even a global development, even though that I take a German perspective, which you see on the headline there. I think Germany is probably one of the most ambitious countries when it comes to this energy transformation. I'd like to briefly explain the perspective that we from Statkraft have on this by very briefly showing you what's going on in Germany for our company. We do have a couple of small-scale hydropower stations along the river Weser, which is very nice for biking, which tells you that it's not very hilly there. Very beautiful though. But we are into hydropower, so we are very fond of it anyway. And we also operate a pump storage hydropower station, which doesn't have any natural inflow, again, because it's not extremely hilly where we have built it. Actually bought it, we haven't built it. And we operate 5 gas and steam turbine power plants, 2 of which are old and in cold reserve, as we call it, and 3 which are brand new, but sitting still, because gas is currently too expensive compared to coal, and obviously too expensive compared to the marginal cost of running renewable power stations. We are at the same time Germany's largest service provider to the renewable investors when it comes to bringing power to the market. We're buying power from 8,500 megawatt of renewable capacity and bringing that into the market for these investors. We are collecting the proceeds from this sales. We're collecting subsidies and bringing that back to the original investors who normally are not engaging themselves into power trading. Yes, this is a map of all our German customers. You can see they're all over the place, predominantly in the northern part because it's predominantly wind that we have under contract. And what we have done, we have actually connected those capacities so we can remote control them from our central office in Düsseldorf. So we can actually ramp down the production when the power doesn't really have a demand. And on the other hand, we can ramp it up again if the demand is back again. And you're probably wondering why that is the case, and that's simply the case because we have so much wind power installed in Germany that sometimes there is simply not enough demand for all the renewable energy production. So it's very important for the German system that all these capacities are remote controlled, and we operate the largest facility for this, where we've currently hooked up, I think, 5,000 megawatt of the total contracted capacity of some 7,500 megawatts. That's a business that we are not only doing in Germany, but also in Scandinavia and in the UK, where we are also market leader. Okay, but I want to talk about the change that has been going on in Europe and especially in Germany. And I would just like to illustrate the change with 2 significant moments and data points in the recent history. I guess you've seen the photograph. This is Fukushima on the 12th March 2011, a hydrogen explosion in one of the reactors, probably watched by most of you either live or in a video broadcast. What you see there in total is the cover page of Der Spiegel, Germany's most important political weekly magazine. Again, this explosion happened on Saturday morning, Central European time. The newspaper is usually shipped to subscribers Monday morning or Sunday night. So on Saturday, this publication is in print. Normally, they wouldn't have had a chance to put this on the front page. So they probably sat there like all of us, watching these pictures and thinking, okay, what does this mean? And they were fast. They said, well, this is the end of the atomic age. Das Ende des Atomzeitalters. That was their bet for the front page. I think they were probably, the editorial team was probably one of the 10 smartest people in Germany to realize that this would have a profound political impact. The other 10 were probably in government. And since government is more than 10 or 5 people, you could see that even part of the government didn't understand what was going on. The Chancellor announced on Monday morning that we would have a nuclear moratorium for how long it might take to solve the situation or to have a political consensus. So basically over 1 week in Germany is exiting nuclear. Very, very significant political change, which I think is irreversible, at least for the next 10 years. And again, this is, I guess, a showcase for also the rest of Europe, where many European countries took similar steps, or even non-European countries taking similar steps. The other, I think, very important data point is this. It's a number from 2012. 14,740, 1,790 megawatts. Does anybody have a good guess what this number represents? This is the number of solar installations going online in June 2012. So a total capacity of 1,790 megawatts was brought online in that month. Anybody, any idea how much money this represents? This represents an investment of roughly 2 billion euros. And anybody, any guess how long it would take to put 2 billion euros into conventional power generation? At least 5 years. At least 5 years. And you would also roughly get that kind of capacity in a, say, lignite-fired power station. But this is 1 month, right? 1 month, 2 billion euros of capex put into work. This is a revolution, by all means. And yes, the sun doesn't always shine. Yes, this is not comparable from a system perspective to conventional power generation, but this is a revolution, nothing short of it. And if you look at the PV industry worldwide and the dynamics, we see, I think, currently manufacturing capacity for PV modules in the range of 30,000 megawatts. So every year, mainly China is producing photovoltaic panels of 30,000 megawatt total capacity. This is going to be installed somewhere in the world. This is changing the energy industry, and I dare to say forever. To be a bit more sober now and go through a bit more of the numbers with you so that you get an impression of the magnitude what we're talking about. This is installed power generation capacity in Germany per technology in gigawatts, so thousands of megawatts, since 2002 up to 2013. And you see in 2002 we had roughly 110 gigawatts installed capacity with a max load of maybe 80,000 megawatts, so a healthy safety margin, everything in good order. The classical well-distributed energy mix that we had traditionally in Germany of nuclear, gas, hard coal and lignite. And then 8 years later we have roughly 40,000 megawatts more capacity, mainly in renewables, but not only. And you see that grew slightly from 2010 to 2011. And then you see a slight shift to 2012. That's when the nuclear capacity left the market, had to leave the market, at least half of it. And you still see an increase in overall capacity simply because so much solar power has been installed. And you've seen one number of June 2012 in more detail earlier. And this is the continuing trend since. So we get more and more and more renewable capacity. And you see that we now have roughly twice the installed capacity that we have demand. What does this mean for operating the system? You see here the average generation profile of wind and solar power in Germany again per month. So this is for each individual month the average renewable production that we've seen over the past 2 years or so, 18 months. And the height of the hill, the mountain, is indicating the power volume that has been produced. And you can see that in the first half of March 2014, which is the last hill very much here, it was a very beautiful month, at least the first half, and because we have seen on average of those first 2 weeks more than 20,000 megawatt of renewable generation, predominantly solar, and that's why there is a systematic peak in the noon hours. This goes hand in hand with a massive decline in power prices, of course, because renewable generation doesn't have any marginal cost, so any generator is willing to actually sell at any price or almost give the power away for free. So at the power market, the wholesale market, prices are simply going down because there is much, much more supply than before. And well, actually the trend is continuing. Currently, forward prices for 2015 are below 34 euros for base load, so this dark blue line here continues downwards. Price spikes. We had seen sometimes very high prices in the past years because of scarcity, because there was a lot of demand in winter and not a lot of generation capacity. And that was the case until roughly 2008. And that simply disappears as of 2009 for several reasons. One of them was certainly less economic activity in general, and it is now representing Germany, France, Netherlands, Italy, Czech Republic and Hungary. So we see far less of those hours where we really have very high prices above 150 euros per megawatt hour. And as of 2009, no more very high prices indicating any scarcity. But we have something new, that's negative prices. There is an increasing number of hours in Germany and in France and in the Netherlands where demand is not high enough for the renewable power production. And then, well, somebody needs to switch off something on the generation side, or somebody needs to consume more power. So what is happening is that while you stop a nuclear generator for an hour or for a few hours, which is very costly, so to do that you demand that somebody pays you actually so that you shut off. Or on the consumption side, somebody turns on a pump or heats air or heats water that they will never use. And that is actually happening. This is not a fairy tale. This is really happening in times of negative power prices. So supply-demand balance is somewhat, well, out of balance, really. Or can only be balanced with very negative prices. This has been continuing and aggravating, really, until last year. We will actually see now a stop of this because since a new regulation in 2012, renewable investors do have an incentive to actually switch off their production and get compensation otherwise. So in the past, it was a produce and forget environment for renewable power generators, and this is no longer the case, so that they actually have an incentive now to switch off when they don't see any demand for their power production. So negative prices will no longer be seen, but of course the missing balance between supply and demand will still be there. Well, you have probably guessed by now that all this is not very good news for a power generator, right? In fact, this is very bad news. And these are the margins for gas units in the year-ahead market. Would we sell all peak time production and buy the gas in return and also the CO2 in return? And you see that we have come in January 2010 from very nice margins of 25 euros per megawatt hour all the way down to 0 at the beginning of 2012. And since then, margins have dropped negative. This means that you will obviously hardly run your power stations at all. And our very nice brand new gas-fired power stations in Germany are hardly running. I think we have a few hundred operating hours last year, so far away from anywhere from profitability. This is the same picture for coal-fired generators, and you see that their margin is not great, but there is still a margin left at least, which is in fact the reason why Germany has to a large extent really switched from gas consumption in power production to even more coal consumption. So the CO2 balance in Germany is not really great, even though we are investing a hell of a lot of money into renewables. Maybe talking about the size of money that we invest into renewables, I could make a few remarks about that in a minute maybe. So what you see here is obviously a situation of oversupply due to overcapacity in both the conventional power generation sector and the renewable sector, which means that the conventional power generation doesn't make any margins anymore to be available when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. So that is why Germany and France and the UK are talking so much about capacity mechanisms, where we are compensated for simply being available as a backup. Such kind of regulation is not existing in Germany, and we think it's actually needed to bring the system into balance long term. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense for us and others to keep the capacity alive and on stream. So significant distortions due to all this shift in the power system. Maybe one more remark with regard to the magnitude that is flowing into renewables, magnitude of money. Does any of you have any guess what the average German would be paying per year as direct renewable subsidies? No? It's 300 euros per year per person. So an average family, 1,200 euros. That's a lot of money. 24 billion euros for the whole country. It's 1% of GDP. This is a very ambitious project, and it will continue. And of course, there is a lot of political debate about it. I personally think that there is no way that that kind of spending can be kept up with. So I think there will be slowly less speed in renewable extension, but it's already a very, very, very large volume going into this segment. Now, what is our role in this new future? How do we react? Well, on the asset side, there is very little we can do. We build power stations for decades and not from one once to another. So we primarily take our reaction on what we call the trading side and the energy management side, where we basically offer our services to third parties. As I mentioned earlier, in Germany we have 8,500 megawatts under contract of third party capacity, which we bring to the market for them and optimize for them. And we think that kind of understanding of the market and the whole value chain will remain important. Actually, we think it's more important than ever before, because the renewable sector, at least in Germany, doesn't have that competence yet. So we have something to contribute there. So in this changing world, I think we have a very nice future in servicing this transformation. And that's really all I can say in 20 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So tell me, Stefan, what is the most? I mean, most of these people are in the same business as you are. But when you meet ordinary Swedish people, what is the first question they ask about Germany concerning energy? Is this Atomzeitalter the important question, or what is it?
No, I think most people are really astonished about the money that is involved. I mean, we're paying on the power bill, the average levy for renewable power is 6 euro cents per kilowatt hour. And I mean, just the subsidy part. And I think for my Norwegian colleagues, this is hardly imaginable. This is probably your total price per kilowatt hour, not only the renewable levy. So it's really the economic effect.
Yeah, and before you leave, you have a little present for you.
Oh, really?
Eko-choklad in Swedish.
Oh,
Oh.
okay. Yeah, tack.
Yeah.
Thank you.